They had been there for 10,000 years. At the very edge of the solar system, where light itself grows tired, enormous metal plates floated in perfect silence, each one wider than a mountain, each one taller than a skyscraper, fixed in space by technology so ancient that humanity didn't even have words to describe it. And on every single plate, a message, the same message, repeated over and over. Do not wake what sleeps inside. Humanity found them in 2031. A deep space probe on its way to the Oort cloud sent back images that made scientists go completely silent for 3 days straight. They called it debris, space junk, the leftover ruins of some dead civilization. Nobody translated the message. Nobody asked, who put them there? Nobody asked the most important question of all. What exactly were they warning about? Then the Vreth came. The Vreth Collective had conquered 14 star systems before humanity lit its first nuclear reactor. Their smallest warship could outpower Earth's entire energy grid by 40,000 times. They had never lost a war. Not once. Not ever. And when their scanners locked onto Earth, they ran a full civilization analysis. It took 4.7 seconds. Population, technology, military capability, psychological profile, threat assessment, for 0.7 seconds, and they had already decided humanity was nothing. They sent a transmission. 3 lines. No negotiation. No emotion. This territory now belongs to the Vreth Collective. Surrender or be destroyed. You have 72 hours. The signal hit Earth on a Tuesday morning. A lone scientist named Dr. Amara Ose decoded it, sat completely still for 3 minutes, and then woke up the entire world. What followed was panic. Raw, global, unstoppable. But in an underground bunker beneath Geneva, General Yusuf Adeyemi placed both hands flat on the table and said 7 words that changed everything. We are not going to surrender. 72 hours passed. Earth sent nothing back. The Vreth analysts logged it as confusion, desperation, a primitive species frozen in fear. He wrote, expected completion time, 6 hours. 6 hours. That's all they gave humanity. But here is what their 4.7 second scan missed, what no sense in the galaxy could ever measure. Humanity was 3.3 million years old. It had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, extinction events, and every single time, it had crawled back up, broken, bleeding, but never finished. The Vreth saw a species just learning to reach the stars. They didn't see what that species had already survived to get there. The Vreth warships ignited their engines, course-locked Earth, and the entire galaxy watched in silence, certain they already knew the ending. Nobody gave humanity a chance. Nobody. But those warning plates had been there for 10,000 years, and nobody had ever stopped to ask why. They were about to find out. It happened on a Wednesday. No warning. No second transmission. No mercy. At exactly 3:12 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the Vreth moved, and in 6 hours, 3 human colonies ceased to exist. Kepler Station was first. Humanity's proudest achievement. A self-sustaining colony of 400,000 people built on a moon orbiting a distant gas giant. 12 years of construction. 3 generations of engineers. The symbol of everything humanity believed it could become. The Vreth hit it with a single ship. 1 ship. The station didn't even have time to send a distress signal. One moment it was there. Lights glowing warm against the cold black of space. The next moment, nothing. Just an expanding cloud of dust and metal where 400,000 human lives used to be. Gone in 4 minutes. Then Nova Base. Then Frontier Colony 7. Same result. Same cold efficiency. Same terrifying speed. By the time Earth's military satellites detected what was happening, it was already over. 3 colonies. 1.2 million people. Erased from existence like someone had simply switched off a light. The Vreth sent no follow-up transmission. They didn't need to. The message was already clear. This is what happens next. This is your future. This is inevitable. The galaxy watched. Every civilization monitoring the situation went completely silent. Species who had fought the Vreth before and lost recognized the pattern immediately. This was how it always started. A warning, then a demonstration, then total conquest. It never went any other way. An alien diplomat from the Seraph Union, one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, sent a private message to Earth's communication array. It was never made public, but it was later recovered from the archives. It said simply, "We are sorry. There is nothing you can do. It is already over." But here is what nobody saw. Here is what happened in the darkness, while the galaxy was writing humanity's obituary. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in a bunker so classified it didn't exist on any official map, a room full of humans sat around a table covered in star charts, weapon schematics, and cold coffee. No one was crying. No one was panicking. General Adeyemi stood at the head of the table. Behind him, a single screen showing the debris field where Kepler Station used to be. 400,000 people. People he knew. People he had shaken hands with. People who had children. He looked at that screen for exactly 30 seconds. Then he turned around. "They just showed us how they fight," he said quietly. That was a mistake. Dr. Mei Lin Zhao pulled up her calculations. She had been running numbers for 48 hours straight. No sleep, no breaks. Just pure focused, terrifying intelligence pointed at one single problem. She said, "Their ships move in predictable strike patterns. They optimize for maximum efficiency. They have never fought an enemy that didn't follow logical defensive protocols." She paused. "We are not going to follow logical defensive protocols." For the first time in 2 days, someone almost smiled. Outside that bunker, Earth was grieving. The loss of 1.2 million people had broken something in the collective human heart. Streets were empty. Skies were quiet. It felt like the whole planet was holding its breath, waiting for the next strike, and the Vreth were already planning it. Their analyst updated his log. Clean, clinical, emotionless. Phase 1 complete. Resistance capacity reduced. Species entering psychological collapse. Recommend Phase 2 initiation in 48 hours. Full planetary suppression expected within 6 days. 6 days. They were going to erase humanity in 6 days. But somewhere, at the very edge of the solar system, those ancient metal plates continued their silent vigil. 10,000 years of waiting. And for the first time, the warning carved into their surface felt less like history. It felt like a prophecy. Do not wake what sleeps inside. The Vreth had already struck. They had already drawn blood. And somewhere deep inside the human species, something very old, very patient, and very dangerous had just opened its eyes. The galaxy thought it was watching an execution. It was actually watching a beginning. There is a certain kind of human that only appears in the darkest moments. You don't find them in peacetime. You don't find them in comfort. You don't find them when everything is fine and the future looks bright. You find them when everything is burning. And on the 3rd day after the strikes, they all walked into the same room. The bunker beneath Mars had no windows, no natural light, no connection to the outside world except encrypted military channels. The air recyclers hummed quietly. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. And around a single steel table, 11 people sat down to decide the fate of the human species. No politicians, no diplomats, no press, just the ones who actually knew how to fight. General Yusuf Adeyemi at the head. To his left, Admiral Priya Nakamura, 58 years old, commander of humanity's deep space fleet. She had lost her entire forward squadron in the Kepler strike. 4,000 sailors, people she had trained personally. She had not slept since. To Adeyemi's right, Dr. Mei Lin Zhao, still running calculations, still drinking cold coffee, still refusing to accept that the numbers were impossible. And around them, engineers, strategists, veterans, and scientists, each one carrying something heavy behind their eyes, each one absolutely certain of one thing. Surrender was not on the table. Adeyemi spoke first. "Let's be honest about where we are," he said. His voice was low, controlled, like a man who had already processed his grief and packed it somewhere useful. "They are stronger. They are faster. Their technology is generations ahead of ours. In a straight fight, we lose. Every time. No exceptions. Silence. So we are never going to fight them straight." Admiral Nakamura pulled up the tactical display. The holographic map of the solar system filled the center of the table. Blue dots marking human positions, red markers showing Vreth fleet movements. There were a lot more red markers than blue. "They fight with perfect efficiency," Nakamura said. "Every move calculated, every strike optimized. They have conquered 14 star systems using the exact same playbook. Warning, demonstration, suppression, conquest." She zoomed in on the Vreth fleet formation. They have never fought an enemy that didn't respond predictably. Dr. Zhao didn't look up from her screen, because every other species they fought was rational. Another silence, heavier this time. Then Adeyemi said the words that would later be studied in every military academy humanity ever built. "Then we are going to be irrational." What followed was 6 hours of planning that should not have been possible. 6 hours of exhausted, brilliant, broken human minds doing what human minds do best. Finding angles that shouldn't exist. Exploiting gaps that logic said weren't there. Building a strategy out of desperation, creativity, and something that no alien civilization had ever successfully modeled. Pure human stubbornness. The plan had 4 phases, each one more aggressive than the last. Each one carrying enormous cost. Each one requiring humans to do things that would have seemed insane 24 hours ago. Dr. Zhao finally looked up from her screen. "The probability of this working is 11.7%, she said flatly. Adeyemi nodded. "What's the probability if we do nothing?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. 0. The answer was 0. "Then 11.7%, Adeyemi said, "is the most hope humanity has ever had." While the War Council planned, something else was happening across the entire human species. Something unorganized, unplanned, unstoppable. In every city, in every country, in every corner of Earth and its remaining colonies, ordinary humans were doing extraordinary things. Factories that made consumer goods retooled themselves overnight to produce weapons components. University physics departments opened their doors and invited military engineers inside. Teenagers who had never held anything more dangerous than a kitchen knife were lining up outside recruitment centers, not because anyone ordered them to, because they were human, because somewhere in that ancient DNA, in that 3.3 million-year-old survival code, a switch had been flipped, the same switch that had been flipped during every ice age, every plague, every war, every moment when extinction looked certain. The switch that said, "Not today." The Vreth analyst updated his log at exactly midnight. Human species showing expected psychological collapse patterns. Minimal organized resistance detected. Phase 2 on schedule. He was completely wrong, but he had no way of knowing that, because what was happening inside humanity, in those bunkers, those factories, those recruitment lines, those kitchen tables where families held each other and whispered promises, none of that showed up on any sensor. Vreth technology could measure power output, fleet positions, weapons signatures. It could not measure rage. It could not measure love. It could not measure the specific quality of human determination that appears only when everything has been taken away. General Adeyemi stood alone in the corridor outside the war room at 2 a.m. Just for a moment, just 1 minute of silence before he went back inside. He thought about Kepler Station, about the 400,000 people who woke up that Wednesday morning not knowing it was their last day, about the children who never got to grow up, about the engineers who had spent their whole lives building something beautiful, only to have it erased in 4 minutes. He felt something settle in his chest. Not anger, not grief, not fear, something colder, something older, something that had no name in any modern language, but would have been immediately recognized by every ancestor he had ever had. He went back inside. "All right," he said, "let's show them what we are." The Vreth expected a broken species. They were about to meet something else entirely. They were about to meet humanity, with nothing left to lose. Clapperboard Part 4, The Ungovernable Species. The Vreth had a word for what they expected next. In their language it translated roughly as the quiet before deletion. It was a phase every conquered species entered after the demonstration strikes. The silence, the stillness, the moment when a civilization finally understood the mathematics of its own destruction and simply stopped resisting. Every species did it, every single one. The Vreth had never seen an exception. They were about to see one. It started small, so small that the Vreth analyst almost missed it entirely. A single human ship, designation unknown, no official military markings, roughly the size of cargo freighter, appeared on long-range sensors, moving away from Mars at maximum speed, heading not toward Earth, not toward any colony, not toward any logical defensive position, heading directly toward the Vreth fleet, one ship, against 412 Vreth warships. The analyst watched it for a moment, then logged it as anomalous debris, possible automated vessel, no threat assessment required. He almost didn't watch what happened next. Almost. The ship's name was the Dunkirk. Inside, 19 humans. Not the best soldiers humanity had. Not super soldiers. Not special operatives with decades of training. Just 19 volunteers who had walked into General Adeyemi's office 48 hours ago and said 4 words that he would never forget for the rest of his life. "Sir, we have an idea." Commander Yara Santos was 31 years old, Brazilian, former deep space cargo pilot. She had brown eyes and a scar above her left eyebrow from a docking accident 7 years ago, and she had never fired a weapon in her life before last Tuesday. She sat in the pilot seat of the Dunkirk and watched the Vreth fleet fill her view screen and felt something she could not quite name. Not peace, not courage, not even fear exactly. Something deeper. Something that felt ancient, like every human who had ever charged into something impossible was standing behind her right now. Every soldier, every firefighter, every parent who had ever stood between her child and something terrible, all of them, right there, in that cockpit. She checked her instruments one final time. She opened the comm channel back to Mars. "General," she said quietly, "tell my mother I love her." Adeyemi's voice came back. Steady, low. She already knows. "Come home, Santos." Santos almost smiled. "Copy that." Then she pushed the throttle to maximum and flew the Dunkirk directly into the heart of the Vreth formation. What happened next took the Vreth completely by surprise. Not because of the ship. Not because of its weapons. The Dunkirk carried nothing that could seriously threaten a Vreth warship. Everyone knew that, including Santos and her crew. What surprised the Vreth was the cargo. 3 months ago, in a classified laboratory on Europa, Dr. Zhao's team had been working on something experimental, a signal technology, designed originally for deep space communication, capable of producing a focused electromagnetic burst across 17 different frequencies simultaneously. It had never been weaponized. Until now, the Dunkirk flew to within 2,000 kilometers of the Vreth command ship, impossibly close, suicidally close, a distance that made every sensor operator in the Vreth fleet sit up straight, and detonated the device. Not a bomb, not a missile, a signal burst. 17 frequencies, simultaneously, focused directly at the Vreth fleet's communication network. The Vreth communication network went dark, not destroyed. Not permanently damaged, just confused, overwhelmed. 17 simultaneous frequencies, hitting a system designed to process clean single-channel transmissions. It lasted 47 seconds. 47 seconds of complete communication blackout across the entire Vreth fleet. To the Vreth, this was a minor inconvenience, a curiosity, Nothing more. To General Adeyemi, it was everything. Because during those 47 seconds, while the Vreth fleet was blind and silent and trying to recalibrate, 17 human ships that had been hiding inside the gas cloud of Jupiter's upper atmosphere came screaming out at maximum velocity. Not warships, retrofitted mining vessels, industrial haulers, ships that had no business being anywhere near a battlefield, each one carrying a single modified payload, each one targeting not the Vreth warships, but the small automated resupply drones that floated behind the fleet. Quiet, undefended, considered completely irrelevant by every tactical model the Vreth had ever built. Nobody attacked supply drones. It was irrational. It was inefficient. In pure military terms, it accomplished almost nothing. The Vreth lost 31 supply drones. That was all, except it wasn't all, because those 31 supply drones carried the fuel converters for the Vreth fleet's long-range jump drives. Replaceable? Absolutely. The Vreth could have replacements delivered in 72 hours. No serious tactical impact whatsoever. But here's what Dr. Zhao had understood that nobody else had. The Vreth fleet had been planning to execute a jump, a faster-than-light repositioning maneuver, in exactly 60 hours, moving from their current position to a staging point directly above Earth for the final planetary suppression assault. Without those fuel converters, the jump was delayed by exactly 96 hours. 96 hours that humanity desperately needed. 96 hours bought not with superior firepower, not with advanced technology, not with any weapon of Vreth had ever seen before, bought with 19 volunteers in a cargo ship and a signal device that had never been meant for war, bought with pure irrational human creativity. The Dunkirk didn't make it home. The Vreth recovered from the communication blackout in 47 seconds, and in the 48th second, they destroyed the ship that had caused it. Santos and her crew of 19 gone. But what they had done, what those 19 ordinary humans had accomplished, rippled across every military channel humanity had. Adeyemi received the confirmation report, the 96-hour delay, the open window, the impossible gift those 19 people had just handed humanity. He sat with it for a long moment. Then he stood up. 96 hours, he said. Not 1 second wasted. Move. In the Vreth command ship, the Supreme Commander reviewed the incident report. A single anomalous attack. Minimal material damage. 31 supply drones. Communication disruption lasting less than 1 minute. By every metric, irrelevant. And yet, he reviewed it again. Then again. Something about it was bothering him in a way he could not immediately process. Something that his analytical systems were flagging as unusual. He had conquered 14 star systems. He had never seen an attack that made no logical sense, and yet somehow still worked. He flagged the report for deeper analysis. For the first time since arriving in this star system, he felt something unfamiliar, not fear. The Vreth did not feel fear, but something adjacent to it. Nobody talks about the price. Everyone remembers the victories, the clever strategies, the impossible odds. But nobody talks about what those moments actually cost. Nobody talks about the people who paid for them. This part is about the price. His name was Sergeant Daniel Okafor, 26 years old, Nigerian British. His mother ran a small food stall outside Lagos every morning. He had her eyes, warm, dark, honest. He had joined the military at 18 not for glory, but because he believed some people had to stand at the edge of the darkness, so others never had to see how dark it really was. 8 years later, 300,000 kilometers above Earth, he still believed that. The mission was called Operation Ember. Simple on paper. 8 soldiers, 1 abandoned orbital platform of Vreth, had converted into a communications relay, planet disruption device. Get out. By Adeyemi's main operation in 12 critical hours. 30-minute window. In and out. Okafor looked at his 7 teammates, faces he knew completely, and thought about his mother's food stall. If this works, She keeps opening that stall every morning. That was enough. Insertion was perfect. They reached the central relay hub with 11 minutes to spare. Private Chin began syncing the disruption device. Everything was going exactly right. Then the Vreth security sweep came 22 minutes early. Chin, Okafor said, completely calm. How long? 6 minutes. I can't rush it or it won't work. 6 minutes. The first security drone came around the corner 30 seconds later. What followed was the longest 6 minutes of Okafor's life. Vreth drones were fast and armored and relentless. His team held the corridors, barely. Private Reyes went down in the second minute, wounded badly. Corporal Asani dragged him back and kept pressure on the wound with one hand and kept firing with the other. Okafor moved forward. Every time a drone appeared, he was there. His hands were shaking. His heart was hammering. Every rational part of him was screaming. But Chin needed 6 minutes. So he stayed. Done, Chin said. Device planted. Mission accomplished. They pulled back. Asani carried Reyes. Everyone moving fast, wounded, running purely on adrenaline. They reached the docking port with 4 minutes to spare. 7 of them made it. Corporal James Webb, 30 years old, Manchester, played guitar badly, laughed at his own jokes, sent money to his younger brother every single month. James Webb held the final corridor while the team boarded. He could have made it. The timing was close, but he could have made it, except one final drone appeared. And the pod had no weapons. And if that drone reached the door before it sealed, Webb turned around. He looked at Okafor through the closing door. He was smiling. That easy, ridiculous nothing is that serious smile. Tell my brother not to waste it, he said. The door sealed. Okafor didn't speak the entire journey back. He sat with Reyes' head in his lap, talking to him quietly, keeping him conscious, and he did not let himself feel what he was feeling. Not yet. Not until the 12 hours were confirmed. Not until he had done everything Webb's sacrifice had bought. He owed him that much. General Adeyemi received a report at 0541 hours. Operation Ember, successful, 12-hour window confirmed. 1 soldier lost. He wrote Webb's name in the small notebook he kept in his breast pocket. Every name, every single one. Then he closed it. Don't waste it, he said quietly. The galaxy counted ships and weapons and power outputs. It never counted courage. Sacrifice. The willingness to stand in a dark corridor so someone else could get home. Humanity had those things in quantities no scanner could ever measure. And the Vreth were about to find out exactly what that meant. There's something that happens to humans under pressure. Other species break. They fracture. They surrender to the mathematics of their own destruction and accept the inevitable. Humans do something different. Humans adapt, not slowly, not carefully, not with the measured pace of civilizations that have centuries to plan their next move. Humans adapt at a speed that should not be biologically possible, at a speed that terrifies anyone watching from the outside, at a speed that looks less like evolution and more like something catching fire. And after Webb, after Santos, after 1.2 million lives erased in a single night, humanity was absolutely, completely, unstoppably on fire. It started in the labs. Dr. Zhao had not slept in 6 days. Nobody around her had either. The Europa Research Complex was running 24 hours. Lights never off, coffee never cold, minds never stopping. They had taken the Vreth communication technology captured from the orbital platform, the same platform Okafor's team had hit, and they had done something the Vreth considered completely impossible. They had reverse engineered it. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to understand the fundamental frequency on which Vreth shields operated. Enough to realize that those shields, those impossibly powerful barriers that made Vreth warships essentially untouchable, had one specific vulnerability. Not a weakness exactly, more like an assumption. The Vreth shields were designed to repel energy, weapons fire, electromagnetic bursts, anything that announced itself as a threat from a distance. They were not designed to handle something that got close first and became a threat second. They built their shields, Zhao said, staring at the data with red eyes and an expression of pure exhausted wonder, against enemies who fight the way they fight. She looked up. Nobody ever got close enough to matter. The new weapon had no official designation for the first 3 weeks. Everyone just called it the Razor. It was not a missile, not an energy weapon, not anything that existing military doctrine had a category for. It was a delivery system, a small, almost undetectable probe that could navigate through active combat at close range, attach itself to the hull of a Vreth warship, and then, from inside the shield perimeter, detonate a focused pulse directly against the hull. From outside, unstoppable shield. From inside, unprotected metal. The mathematics were brutal and beautiful and completely human in their creativity. Zhao presented it to Adeyemi at 0300 hours on a Thursday morning. He looked at the schematics for a long time. How many could we build? In 72 hours, 400. Build 800. Zhao almost smiled. That will require every manufacturing facility we have. Then use every manufacturing facility we have. But weapons alone were never going to be enough. Adeyemi knew that. Zhao knew that. Every person in that bunker knew that. The Vreth fleet outnumbered humanity's remaining ships by a ratio that made the Razor, brilliant as it was, insufficient on its own. They needed more. They needed allies. And that meant doing something that required a different kind of courage entirely. It meant asking for help. The Sereth Union had sent that private message after the first strikes. It is already over. They were old, older than any civilization humanity had encountered. 12,000 years of recorded history. They had fought the Vreth once, centuries ago, and lost badly enough that they had spent every decade since making absolutely certain the Vreth had no reason to look in their direction again. They were not cowards. They were survivors. There is a difference. Admiral Nakamura made the call herself, not an official transmission, not a diplomatic channel, a direct personal communication to the Sereth Elder Council, in their own language, which she had spent 48 hours learning the basics with the help of 3 linguists and 0 sleep. She did not ask for soldiers. She did not ask for ships. She did not ask for anything the Sereth would consider a threat to their careful neutrality. She asked for something else. Tell us where the Vreth have been, she said. Every system they have conquered, every civilization they have absorbed. Tell us what they did and what those species did back. Whatever worked, whatever didn't. Tell us everything you know. A long silence from the Sereth end. Then the Elder Council responded. They sent a data package that took 11 hours to download. 300 years of Vreth conquest, detailed records, every battle, every strategy, every attempt at resistance. Failed and otherwise. Nakamura's team went through it in 72 hours. And buried deep inside, in the records of a small civilization called the Wendar that the Vreth had conquered 200 years ago, they found something. One battle. One moment, where a Wendari fleet had done something unexpected and caused the Vreth significant damage before being destroyed. The Wendari had used their own ships as mobile obstacles, creating unpredictable debris fields that disrupted Vreth formation flying. It hadn't saved the Wendari, but it had given Nakamura an idea she combined with the Razor, and with the communication disruption technology from the Dunkirk, and with 3 other adaptations her team had developed in the past week. She called it the Layered Chaos Protocol. The name alone would have told the Vreth everything they needed to know if they had been paying attention. Chaos. Deliberate. Designed. Weaponized chaos. The most human battle strategy ever conceived. While Nakamura planned and Zhao built and Adeyemi coordinated, something else was happening that nobody had planned for. Other species were watching. Not just the Sereth. Others. Smaller civilizations that lived in the shadow of the Vreth. Species that bent the knee and paid tribute and kept their heads down for generations, hoping that obedience would keep them safe. They had been watching humanity since the first strike, waiting for the collapse, waiting for the surrender, waiting for the inevitable. Instead, they had watched the Dunkirk. They had watched Operation Ember. They had watched the species that should have been broken. Somehow, inexplicably, impossibly, still fighting, still adapting, still refusing. A representative from a small species called a Thren, who had never in their recorded history initiated contact with another civilization, sent a single transmission to Earth. No formal introduction. No diplomatic preamble. Just one line. We have 12 ships. They are yours if you want them. Adeyemi read the message 3 times. Then he picked up the comm. Tell them yes, he said. Tell them thank you. And tell them they just made history. The Vreth Supreme Commander reviewed his analyst's latest report with something approaching confusion. Human military capability was not declining as projected. It was increasing. New weapon signatures had been detected. Unknown technology. Unclassified tactical patterns. And now, inexplicably, non-human vessels appearing in human formation. Allies. The humans had found allies. In 11 previous conquests, no species had ever successfully recruited outside support. Once the Vreth engagement began, the psychological impact of the demonstration strikes was specifically designed to prevent exactly that, to make every watching civilization understand that alliance with a target was a death sentence. It had always worked. The commander flagged the report as priority critical and called an immediate strategic review. For the second time since arriving in the star system, he felt that unfamiliar sensation, that thing adjacent to fear. These creatures, he thought, do not behave according to any model we have. In the Mars bunker, Adeyemi stood before his full war council for the first time since the beginning. New faces now. Sarah data analysts. Thren military liaisons. Human engineers who had not slept properly in 2 weeks, but whose eyes were bright with something that looked dangerously like hope. He looked around the room. He thought about Kepler Station, about the Dunkirk, about Webb in that corridor, about every name in his notebook. He thought about what all of it had bought. This room, this moment, this impossible, improbable, thoroughly human coalition standing here when every calculation said they should already be gone. 96 hours, he said. That's when the Vreth fleet will be in optimal position for their final assault. That's our window. 1 shot. He pulled up the tactical display. Let's make it count. The galaxy had watched humanity absorb blow after blow. It had watched humanity bleed and lose and pay impossible prices. Now, for the first time, it watched humanity raise its head. And what it saw in humanity's eyes was not desperation. It was something far more dangerous. It was intent. Clapperboard Part 7. Checkmate. Every war has one moment, one decision, one gamble, one point where everything that came before either meant something or meant nothing at all. This was that moment. Admiral Priya Nakamura stood at the head of the war room and presented her plan at 0600 hours on a Friday morning. She had been awake for 31 hours. Her uniform was wrinkled. Her voice was steady. She spoke for 12 minutes. When she finished, complete silence. Then General Adeyemi said, "How many people survive if this goes wrong?" Nakamura didn't hesitate. Nobody. 7 of the 9 council members voted against it immediately. The plan was called Operation Last Light. It required humanity's entire remaining fleet. Every ship, every razor weapon, every ally the Thren had provided, to move directly toward the Vreth formation, not defensively, not strategically, straight at them, suicidal on its surface. Exactly what the Vreth would expect from a desperate species in final collapse. Their models would read it as a last panic charge, emotionally driven, tactically meaningless. That was precisely the point, because what the Vreth models would not read, what no alien sense would detect, were the 200 razor probes hidden inside modified Thren cargo vessels moving silently on a completely different vector, invisible, unhurried, while every Vreth sensor was locked onto the charging human fleet, a distraction built from an entire civilization's remaining hope. They will annihilate the forward fleet, Nakamura said quietly. We know that, but in the 60 seconds it takes them to recalibrate after the initial engagement, the Razors reach the command ships. 60 seconds. The entire plan lived or died in 60 seconds. The two council members who voted yes were Adeyemi and a Thren liaison named Commander Veth, who had lost his entire home colony to the Vreth 40 years ago and had been waiting for this moment ever since. Adeyemi looked around the table at the 7 who had voted no. I understand, he said simply. I'm doing it anyway. Nobody left the room. When it mattered, they were human, and humans don't abandon each other. The fleet launched at 0900 hours. Every ship humanity had left, the Thren vessels alongside them, moving together toward the largest military force any of them had ever seen. Okafor was on one of those ships. He stood at the viewport and watched the Vreth fleet filling the darkness ahead and thought about Webb, about Santos, about every name in Adeyemi's notebook. He thought, we are the price, and we are paying it willingly, because that is what humans do. The Vreth Supreme Commander watched the human fleet approach and felt something he had never felt in 14 conquests. Confusion. Why are they charging? This is irrational. This is suicide. His analysts flagged it as desperation. Final collapse behavior. The commander almost accepted that assessment. Almost. That unfamiliar sensation, that thing adjacent to fear, whispered something different. They are showing you something. Look away. He looked away 3 seconds too late. The Razor probes hit the Vreth command ships simultaneously. 200 focused pulse detonations. Inside the shield perimeter. Direct hull contact. The Vreth formation fractured. Not destroyed. The Vreth were too powerful for that. But fractured. Confused. Suddenly fighting on 2 fronts against a weapon their shields could not stop. Their models had not predicted, and their doctrine had no answer for. 60 seconds of chaos. 60 seconds that humanity had purchased with everything it had. It was enough. The galaxy watched the Vreth formation break, and for the first time in 300 years of conquest, it watched the Vreth retreat, not defeated, not destroyed, but stopped by humans, by the most dangerous, irrational, unstoppable creatures in the universe. The Vreth retreated. Not a tactical repositioning, not a strategic withdrawal, a full retreat. Something that had never happened in 14 conquests, 300 years of expansion, and the entire recorded history of the Vreth Collective. The galaxy watched in absolute silence. Then, slowly, it started to understand what it had just witnessed. The war did not end that day. Wars never end in a single moment. There were 3 more months of smaller engagements, border skirmishes, Vreth probing attacks testing whether humanity's victory was real or a lucky anomaly. Every single time, humanity answered. Not perfectly, not without cost. More names went into Adeyemi's notebook. More families received the kind of news that breaks something permanently. More ordinary people paid extraordinary prices. But the Vreth never came back in full force. They had run their models, rebuilt their projections, reanalyzed every engagement from the first strike to the Razor assault, and their conclusion, cold, clinical, and for the first time in their history, honest, was 3 words. We cannot predict them. For a civilization built entirely on calculation and efficiency, those 4 words were a death sentence for any campaign. You cannot conquer what you cannot model. You cannot defeat what refuses to behave according to any known pattern. The Vreth did not understand humanity, and they were wise enough, finally, to fear what they did not understand. The formal ceasefire came on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week the original transmission had arrived. Nobody planned that. It just happened that way, as if the universe had a sense of symmetry. The Vreth sent one final transmission. It was not an apology. The Vreth did not apologize. It was not a concession of defeat. It was something far more significant coming from them. It was an acknowledgement. Species designation, human. Classification updated. Previous assessment, irrelevant. Current assessment, unquantifiable. Engagement suspended indefinitely. Reason: insufficient data for reliable outcome projection. Insufficient data. That was how the most powerful military force in the sector described humanity. Adeyemi read the transmission, sat with it for a long moment. Then he wrote one final entry in his notebook. Not a name this time, just 2 words. We remained. 6 months after the ceasefire, Sergeant Daniel Okafor went home to Lagos. He sat at his mother's food stall on a warm morning and ate breakfast and watched the city move around him. Ordinary people, ordinary lives, children going to school, traders setting up their stalls. The smell of food and rain in life. He thought about Webb. He thought, this ordinary beautiful morning. This is what it was for. This is what you bought. He didn't try to stop the tears. Some prices deserved to be felt fully. Dr. Zhao slept for 18 hours straight the day the ceasefire was announced. When she woke up, she went straight back to her lab. Not for war this time, for something better. The Vreth technology they had captured, studied, understood, was opening doors that would take humanity decades to walk through. New propulsion, new energy, new ways of seeing the universe. The war had cost humanity enormously, but humanity, being humanity, was already turning the cost into something, and those warning plates, those enormous ancient metal plates at the edge of the solar system, fixed there by technology older than recorded history, they were still there, still silent, still waiting. After the war, a research team finally managed a full translation. The message was longer than 3 lines, much longer, but it ended the same way it began, with the same warning that had floated unread for 10,000 years. The last line of the full translation read, "If you are reading this, it is already too late to warn you. The creature that lives in this system does not know what it is yet, but it will, and when it does, the universe will never be the same. We try to contain it. We failed, so we leave only this: do not wake it with violence. Do not corner it. Do not take what it loves. Because the human is not dangerous when it is strong. The human is dangerous when it has nothing left to lose. Congratulations. You have awakened the most dangerous creature in the universe. We are sorry for what comes next." Nobody knew who had written those plates. Nobody knew how they had known. But somewhere out there, in the deep dark between the stars, the Vreth Supreme Commander read the full translation when his intelligence division finally decoded it. He sat with it for a very long time. Then he did something he had never done in his entire life. He issued a standing order to every Vreth fleet in every sector. Avoid all human territory. Do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not make contact. Not because humanity had beaten them, but because the plates were right. Humanity didn't know what it was yet, and the Vreth had absolutely no desire to be there when it found out. The galaxy had watched an execution. It had witnessed a birth. Humanity had been pushed to the edge of extinction and had come back not just surviving, but evolving, not just fighting but becoming the most dangerous creature in the universe, not because of its weapons, not because of its technology, because of its heart, its rage, its love, its absolute refusal to accept the end. That is what humanity is. That is what you are. And the universe, for the first time, was paying attention.